So consider that firm A and B. Each firm wants to borrow 40 million for 3 years. Now, firm A wants to finance an interest-sensitive asset and therefore want to borrow what? Floating rate, right? Because want to finance interest rate sensitive asset, which means that floating rate actually cover the interest rate risk. Firm A has good credit rate and they can borrow at LIBOR. Next firm B want to also finance but different assets, interest rate insensitive asset. So they don't have to cover by interest rate changes. They basically want to pay lower rate basically. So they want to borrow fixed rate. B has lower credit rate, so they can borrow fixed at 5.5%. Now this is based on credit rate, A can borrow 5%, B can borrow 5.5% because A has the better credit rate. Floating, A can borrow LIBOR and B can borrow LIBOR plus 0.2% point, basically. So let's look at the case of firm A, I'm sorry. So firm A basically borrow their bank 5.0%, right? Because they can borrow 5.0%. So they pay 5.0% interest to its own bank. Now, swap bank offer this swap. So you can give the swap bank US dollar LIBOR and they receive 5.1% fixed rate because their quote is 5.1 to 5.2. So bid price is 5.1%, ask price is 5.2%. Now, this case, see what happened. Look at the A's cost. So A actually have, now they pay LIBOR, pay 5%, right? So pay LIBOR to the swap bank, pay 5% for bank X, so its own bank, and then A receive 5.1%. So their cost is actually LIBOR minus 0.1%, which means that comparing with their original floating rate, they can borrow at LIBOR, but now with this swap, they can save 0.1% points. Okay, right? So again, they pay LIBOR, they pay 5% fixed, and they receive 5.1 because there's a bid price 5.1% from the swap bank. Now let's see firm B. Now firm B also borrow LIBOR plus 0.2%. So they borrow floating rate. And then swap bank have, say, 5.1 to 5.2 quotation, right? So they can actually pay 5.2, receive LIBOR. What happened here is now B cost is they pay LIBOR and plus 0.2%, so that's the floating rate they pay, and then pay 5.2% to swap bank and receive the LIBOR. So B's cost is 5.4%. Now go back to the slide. You know, if you look at the slide, and they can borrow at 5.5%. So it means that their cost declined by 0.1% point. So their savings, they say the bank B saves 0.1% point. So both parties can save the interest rate. by swapping. So firm A originally want to get what? Want to get floating rate, but they borrow fixed rate and swap with the swap bank, then receive the LIBOR minus 0.1% lower floating rate. And then firm B want a fixed rate, but instead of just getting fixed rate directly, they swap, they basically borrow from their bank for the floating rate LIBOR plus 0.2% and swap with the swap bank, and they actually can have 5.4% fixed interest rate, 0.1% point below the original fixed rate they might get. Now, what about swap bank? Now, swap bank is simple. So by this transaction, basically, they make this spread, right? The spread is 5.2 minus 5.1, which is 0.1% spread. That's their compensation. So their cost is declined by 0.1%, which means that they have profit. And obviously, these differences should be the profit. That's why they actually quote like that. So if you combine everybody, and if the notional size is $40 million, notional size is the size of the contract that they actually use as a principal. It doesn't have to be the principal of the loan, however, but there's a contract size. The nominal size of the contract is 40 million. The tenor is for 3 years because they want to finance 3 years. So because their size is 40 million, basically 0.1% saved A. So A earns 0.1% of the 40 million, which is $40,000 per year. B also $40,000 because it saves 0.1%. And then swap bank receives 0.1% spread, 40,000. Everybody happy, right? So both parties save the money, and then swap bank make a profit, which is the bid-ask spread. So for interest swap, the principal sums the two counterparties raised are not exchanged usually, since both counterparties have borrowed in same currency. The amount of interest payments exchanged are based on the notional sum, which means that the 40 million is notional, not the one that they really need, which may not equal the exact amount actually borrowed by each counterparty. In practice, only net differences is actually exchanges. So they really don't exchange $40 million. So for example, for this example, company B would pay to the swap bank the net difference between 5.2% and the LIBOR percent, because that's what they actually swap, right? So they basically pay 5.2 and receive LIBOR. No, actually they pay LIBOR and then they receive 5.2, right? So the bank on the B company B only pay these differences basically, right? And the notional value is $40 million. Doesn't matter how much they finance, they actually have to pay the interest of this 40 million, and the interest difference is $40 million. Okay, so that's how vanilla plain swap works, which is called also the interest rate swap. The next part is the last part of chapter 14, which is the currency swap.